I'm joined by Dr. Jara, Dr. Jesus Jara, Clark County School District Superintendent. Dr. Jara, thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me, Brian. It's always great to see you.
It's good to see you. Look forward to an in-studio, in-person interview at some point, but for now, we'll chat this way. And if we could start, of course, with the big issue of schools reopening. And before we stay in the present and look forward, if we could just take a look back and the combination of the advice of Dr. Fauci, of the CDC, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, that schools should be open and should be reopened, and that the data studying those private and parochial and Catholic schools is in, and it's not showing the super spread of schools that people worried about back at the beginning of the pandemic. How do you address CCSD parents who say, why haven't our kids been in school?
Yeah, you know what, Brian? One of the things that we've been looking at is really how do we safely open our campuses? And I think, the plan we brought forward to the Board of Trustees in January, which we brought in November, it was really the timing, not knowing and understanding a lot of the data from the beginning of the world pandemic that we were facing. It's really it was the perfect timing. When we came back in January, we felt that at that point, looking at all the different facets of what our kids were facing, right? We've had the health crisis, we've had the academic loss, and some of the other challenges that we face, and then looking at the mental health of both our students and our staff, we felt that it was important to start partnering and to come in and find ways to look at a small transition in. I'll be honest, I was a little bit concerned in November when you started seeing the spiking of the COVID numbers going up. And looking at the holiday season, then you see the spike in Thanksgiving, spike of Christmas. Then the decision was look at a March timeline, which is what we announced, to come in face to face with a pre-K 3.
I'm really glad you pointed out the case numbers, because I've heard some of the pushback from people citing case numbers in the general population going up. But again, the studies are showing that is just not happening. The major concern about student to teacher and student to student transmission of COVID, now that the data is in, it's not happening at the levels that they worried about. In fact, some studies are showing students are even safer in schools, as Dr. Robert Redfield talked about. The latest CDC study says that children would be relatively safe returning back to the classroom with proper safety protocols in place. How does CCSD and you as the leader address those safety protocols?
You know what, so I apologize, I was a little late this afternoon. That's exactly what we were doing. I was with the state superintendent, the governor's office, the Southern Nevada Health District, the state health officials, really making sure, and really the partnership and the support of the governor and his executive team to really say, do we have everything in place? And that's what we were sharing going back. And we saw some gaps, and now there's going to be some assistance from the state level and also from the county. When I say the gaps is, do we have all our testing? And part of our agreement that we would have random selected COVID testing for the adults in our campuses. So putting all these mitigating measures in place, our ventilation, cleaning our buildings, and all these different things are in place. And I think we have a great plan that our parents will feel comfortable with sending their kids to school.
What about the issue, which has clearly broken your heart as it has ours to report it, the issue of suicidality and the amount of mental health challenges that have been engendered due to the pandemic? You have spoken about this in one of the recent articles in the New York Times. You said regarding kids, they've got to start seeing some movement. They need some hope, which I think everyone can agree with. And when you think about those students between the ages of 9 up through high school that have died by suicide, talk about the importance of addressing the mental health of students who have dealt with something completely unprecedented since March, being essentially isolated, disconnected, stuck on a screen, and talk about how we help those children.
Yeah, you know what, Brian, it's been heartbreaking as a father and a superintendent. Is really, how do we find ways for our children to socialize? Obviously the academics is so important, but where our hardworking educators are interacting face to face. providing some of that social emotional support through lessons. It's a little bit challenging when you're doing it virtually. And those are some of the things that we're bringing in, in making decisions to come back. And that was one of the pillars to speed up so kids can see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. That's going to be a long-term approach here in Clark County School District, because once they start coming in, we don't know, what they've been facing at home, and then the economy, the parents. So I think when we start looking at the effects that we have seen, is something we need to really stay focused on. And we started a Lifeline pilot with 12 schools. Now we've grown it to 68 schools, where our social workers, our school psychologists are really looking at the data, the engagement in class, the absenteeism in school. It's through distance ed. How do we support them, and how do we start bringing them in? We started that, and we're seeing some really positive, I would say, interaction in our school. So we not only have to do that now, do it when we come back, but I think long-term effects, we're, as a community, we have to continue this conversation to support our children.
And you've given that light at the end of the tunnel to the pre-K through third graders. Are you concerned at all that the students who have died by suicide are between the age of fourth grade and up through high school, which is the exact age range that will continue to do school at home, essentially continuing that isolation? Does that concern you?
Well, you know what? I've been concerned all along, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
this has been the toughest, challenge that I've had to face as an educator of 25 plus years. But one of the things that we added as well, and proud of the board's decision on a unanimous vote for small group support. So K-12, so 4 through 12, there's going to be that possibility for schools to identify, principals to identify with their teams to start bringing in small groups for academic support, for social emotional, for extra tutorial, extra support. So, that's where you start seeing this positive potential slow moving forward. So there's going to be some opportunity for my educators and I have all the faith in the world of our building principals to be able to identify kids to bring them in for some of the supports that we need to put in place.
We talk about the different aspects of life that are so important to students, the academic, the social, and of course the sports. What do you think is going to happen with sports? We've heard about a one-day season or a one-game season for basketball. We've heard about the possibility of fall sports being played like football in the spring, and then again a new season next fall. If the governor moves forward on allowing sports to happen, what do you see as getting sports right? Because these kids miss playing. You know that as their leader.
No, I do, and as a former student athlete and as a former coach as well, I get the critical component that sports play in a kid's life. But I also have to focus on the instruction. I have to focus on the student part of the athlete, the student athlete. And when you start thinking about, I need to bring in my high school students, my middle school students into the classroom first before you can look at the extracurricular activities. I mean, I know how important it is, but if we can't do the academics, then how could we focus on the sports or even the performing arts, which are just as important?
Academics first, then athletics and performing arts. And it is, in terms of the details, still a work in progress as to how exactly it'll be played out.
They are. And one of the things that I want to make sure that, because there's folks out there saying, well, I've canceled the fall sports. I haven't canceled the fall sports for August. This is just, if you recall, the seasons were all moved. So it's the current situation now. So August 21, 22, the school year 21, 22, there hasn't been a decision around that. I want the kids to come back as soon as possible.
Can we clarify vaccine availability to CCSD staff? We had heard, a week and a half, 10 days ago, some educators saying, hey, we were turned away, a little bit of misinformation. Can you just take a moment to clarify about vaccine availability for CCSD educators?
That, again, part of the conversation with the governor's office and the Southern Nevada Health District just this afternoon. Right now we are prioritizing pre-K3. UNLV and higher ed has stepped in and really provided a pod where our folks can go in. The problem that we had, when we were turning folks away, it wasn't that there wasn't the availability. It was just the overrun. Really, everybody just getting excited to go get vaccinated, and now in coordination with the three entities, our teachers, our pre-K teachers, support staff, administrators, bus drivers will look at to start going into the UNLV pod to be a priority for us.
Fifth largest school district in the country, and while you're dealing with the ramifications of a global pandemic, there's other issues that CCSD still has to deal with, and you've pointed out the teacher shortage issue and the largest class size issue. How do you continue to address those?
You know what? We put together, back in 8 months ago, really put together a commission to look at our teacher retention and recruitment strategies that we've had. So the commission last week, actually 10 days ago, delivered a report to me on one of the things that we need to look at. Obviously, recruitment is a priority, but then how do we do our hiring practices? How do we shrink our process to make sure that once we touch a recruit, then we get them in the classroom as soon as possible. So a lot of great recommendations. But I'm going to tell you, one of the big things is we need to build our own. We need to build our own teachers within our schools, working with higher ed, get them through, and then bring them back in and recruit them. We do have, last year we had close to 12,000 students that on first day were facing with a vacant position. That number needs to shrink because we need to address that to make sure we get a highly qualified, certified teacher in every classroom.
Dr. Jara, you addressed this in an op-ed I read that you wrote months ago, and that is about when kids fall behind, trying to get them caught up. So in some cases, it's a real uphill battle, and I'm looking at the fact that the percentage of F grades given out doubled from 6 to 13% compared with fall of 2019. And of course, these kids have been, as we talked about, learning on a screen since March. And we're going to talk about some of the positives those teachers are doing in that distance learning. But first, for the amount of Fs that have gone up and kids that are falling behind without that in-person instruction, how do we ever catch them up? It seems like a monumental task.
It does. And one of the things that, we start immediately with our small groups, right? Coming and bringing them back in and looking at some of the federal dollars that are coming in and what do we need to do? Is it a year-round instruction? Is it more support? It's not going to be what we call after-school tutorial or Saturday school. This is going to be a long process, and I think the federal government, us urban superintendents have been, raising the red flag to our federal government to say this has got to be an investment of the federal government to really accelerate the opportunities for our kids. So there's going to be the immediate, but then the long term has got to be a lot of different strategies that we have already started to plan to really be able to address long term for our schools.
One of the things, and I quote you again here, you said, am I doing everything possible to open our schools? When you look at the recommendations from the CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, even Dr. Fauci talking about schools should be opened and should be reopened, and yet as those that are trying to reopen it, they deal with pushback, they deal with concerns, some valid. How do you continue to move forward when there are people that are concerned? It seems like you have to continue to reference the studies that are in, the data that is in. How do you deal with that pushback?
Well, one of the things, and I'm going to tell you, I'm very fortunate. I would say that we have a great partnership with our teachers union because we do have an agreement with our teachers union to come back to school face to face. Not many districts do across the country. So proud of the work that we've done here to really make sure that our teachers felt safe, our support professionals and all our other employees. So that's a huge step forward. So that's where you start saying, okay, campuses are safe. Now let's address the instructional model for our parents to feel safe to send their kids. So that's where you look at the partnerships and the collaborations all unified. The work is hard enough pre-COVID. So bringing everybody in to say, are we all on the common mission to bring in our children to school? And that's one of the things that I feel honored to work with my colleagues across the table to really be able to bring a plan that supports our kids. And I'm excited about that.
A lot of moving parts, and that excitement is genuine because we know kids are so excited to see their friends again and to be around their teachers and to have that. And boy, it's needed for them after that long stretch away. But I want to address the positive of the men and women who were teaching under very difficult circumstances of distance learning. We did some Cool at Schools, kind of a home edition, if you will. It featured some of those stories. Talk about how impressed you've been with what these teachers have done to step up in really very difficult circumstances.
Oh, absolutely. I am so proud of the 42,000 employees. I mean, you talk about the fifth largest district turned upside down and jumped in, right, and do distance education. And you know, from food service department to going in 9 million meals in this community, bus drivers, to look at support professionals, to be able to jump in, our staff, and our teachers, right? I mean, I had an opportunity to substitute in a classroom. It's hard, you know, because I'm going to tell you, you got 18 and you got some, you know, 18, 17 kids in there. They're all chatting away different times and coming in, and then you're looking into, you're not seeing their face, you're seeing phone numbers. It's hard. And kudos to our teachers, you know, and then some creative lessons that I've seen videos, I've seen teachers outside trying to get our kids engaged. I am so proud of our educators during these difficult times that have been, you know, say, we're in and we're going to do the best we can. And I couldn't be more proud of all the work that they've done those last 9 months.
Lastly, Dr. Jara, student truancy with online learning, the kids that aren't jumping on the Zoom, that are hard to reach, maybe clicking on and clicking off, how is that still being addressed? Because the fourth graders and older will continue at home for at least the interim.
Yeah, you know what? We're doing wellness checks. Our truancy officers have gone in and really in home visits. You know, this is where our teachers, our educators are so passionate about our kids. And those are all the things that they're going in, checking in at home, whether it's a principal, a truancy officer, do wellness checks. Are you checking in? Why not? What's going on? How can we help you? Partnership with the county and looking at the harbor, any of these social wraparound services that we need to provide our kids. Those are all the things that we're doing to help them. And I'm going to, you know, just really, I thanked all my teachers, 42,000 employees. And I want to thank you, our parents, you're right. You guys have become our adjunct teachers to really chime in and really help our kids, which has been phenomenal. So, you know, great community, great support. It hasn't been easy. It's been difficult. It's not perfect. But given the circumstances, I'm proud of the work that's taken place in this community on behalf of our kids.
Dr. Jara, we really appreciate your time and covering some really tough topics in what is an unprecedented time. And we look forward to continuing to see the improvement and getting those kids back in the classroom. And we thank you for your hard work and your time.
Thank you so much, Brian. Love to see you soon.
All right. Me as well. Thanks, Dr. Jara.
Take care.
Bye now.